Cases of foot and mouth disease have reemerged in parts of Europe, with cases reported in Germany, Hungary, and Slovakia. Germany, which saw an outbreak in January, has since regained its FMD-free status as of mid-May. I'm Johanna Bota, and to help us understand what these developments mean for the agricultural sector and international trade, I'm joined by StoneX's head of EMEA Dairy and Food Consulting, John Lancaster. Welcome, John. Good to have you back. I want to start by looking back to Friday, June 6th, when the Hungarian authorities announced that they had successfully contained the foot and mouth outbreak. Now, since then, all restrictions from both Hungary and the EU have been lifted. Can you give us more detail on how it all unfolded?
Yeah, so so we're about 2.5 or 2 months into this outbreak in Hungary. Um, so to kind of just give a little bit of a chronological timeline, the first outbreak this year was in Germany, and that was 14 water buffaloes in Brandenburg near Berlin. And that outbreak is totally unrelated to the outbreak in Hungary and in Slovakia. So the genetic tests show that these are different strains of the foot and mouth virus. I suppose just to start off with as well, for any of the viewers, foot and mouth is a disease that only impacts animals. It has no impact on humans, either directly as in infecting them or in the meat or in dairy products or any of the animal goods. But from an economic point of view, it's incredibly detrimental to agriculture. So it's um, one of the most virulent diseases that affect agricultural animals, but it's also one of the ones that has the most restrictions regarding trade, movement of agricultural products made from animal products, so dairy, meat, etc. So that's kind of giving the context of why getting foot and mouth free status is going to be so important for Hungary. Um, when foot and mouth was first discovered in Hungary and then notified to the EU and to the World Veterinary Organizations, immediately that puts in a whole lot of restrictions. So straight away, any export of raw milk was banned out of Hungary. So foot and mouth can be transferred in a number of different ways. It can be airborne from the animal breeding. It sheds directly from the animals. So you have humans that carry it on their clothes, on machinery, on wheels, etc. But most importantly, from the point of view of export and trade, is it can also be carried in the meat and in dairy products. So immediately, raw milk and raw milk, meat, etc., was banned. However, high temperature pasteurized goods or double pasteurized dairy goods that was unrestricted. So there's some subtlety in how the restrictions were put in place for intra EU trade.
Now, you also mentioned, and I actually think that's a really good point to differentiate from hand and foot mouth disease that adults get. So thank you for that. We were talking about also other outbreaks that occurred in Slovakia, for example. Now, it seems like the situation there is improving, but the country is not out of the woods yet. What can you tell us about that part?
Yeah, so the basically outbreak in Hungary and Slovakia, it's basically one bigger outbreak. So it's basically along the border between Hungary and Slovakia. Obviously, as both are separate countries and have different jurisdictions, they're handling it slightly differently. The Hungarian outbreak was first, but then very quickly across the river in Slovakia, there was animals detected there with foot and mouth. Because of free movement in Europe and labor, etc. And they think a lot of movement of both animals and of people have been the vector for the movement of the disease between Slovakia and Hungary and to the different infected farms in two countries. Slovakia is progressing well as well. It hasn't had a positive case in over a month and a half now at this stage. So it's very close to the Hungarian timeline. And they haven't announced yet, obviously, to your point there, that they are foot and mouth free, but there has been no additional cases. So I think the confidence will be growing there as well. And just to give kind of a little bit of context to the scale of what the Hungarians did, did almost 250,000 tests on both domestic animals, on wild animals, anything that could be a carrier of foot and mouth. So those there's a combination of PCR testing, so similar to what we did during COVID. So that technology has advanced incredibly rapidly over the last 20 years. So versus say when the big outbreak was in the UK, so it means that you can get very rapid results, and there's a 4-day period for foot and mouth when the animal's infected. It's shedding virus, but it's showing no clinical symptoms. So traditionally, it's very hard to detect in that period, but PCR testing and enzyme testing can actually detect it. So we have a lot more confidence, I suppose, versus say 20, 30 years ago on being able to contain these outbreaks because we have higher capacity testing, low cost testing to be able to roll into that. So kind of going back to the Slovakia piece, I think they will probably make an announcement over the next week or two. Maybe they're just being a little bit more conservative around their timelines, etc., or they want to do another round of testing just to be sure. But both countries are looking very positive. Um, and then once they are foot and mouth free for more than 3 months, they can then apply to the World Animal Health Organization for their foot and mouth free status to be reapplied. And that means that export restrictions or import restrictions really from other countries, not really export, but it harms the country's exports. Import restrictions from other countries are taken away. So right now, all of the restrictions, mainly around raw milk and unpasteurized products or meat, really from the infection zone or from the greater area, and those have been the bigger issue. And within the EU now, pretty much that's unrestricted. And then once the foot and mouth free status is fully applied, they will have at least no foot and mouth restrictions globally. Now, you still might have some international buyers who are a little bit more conservative around that they want a little bit longer time. But from the point of view of getting these health certificates that you need for exporting meat or dairy products, they need that line that says foot and mouth free status from a foot and mouth free status
Well,
country.
John, that brings me to my next point. Sorry to interrupt, but obviously we were just talking about a lot of bordering countries and all within the EU. But a few weeks back, we also saw that the UK stepped in with its own protective measures, obviously clearly showing just how seriously this is being taken across Europe. So, what exactly did they do and why?
Yeah. So once the announcement of the foot and mouth had been detected in Hungary, the UK very quickly put in general restrictions on import of meat and dairy products from Hungary and Slovakia, the same as they had done from Germany earlier. So that as a preventative measure. Um, and then they announced that products that were high temperature pasteurized or double pasteurized that they were not restricted. But one of the points that I suppose the bigger points for the UK more recently has been restriction of private individuals importing cheese or meat products, etc. So somebody visiting France and wanting to bring back a car boot load worth of cheese, that's effectively restricted.
Unbelievable. Because I do that all the time. Meat and cheese when I go to France.
Yeah, and some really nice products, and for people kind of looking at that, going, this seems incredibly restrictive. But going back to the point around how virulent the disease is, back in 2001, the UK had a very big outbreak of foot and mouth. Total economic damage is estimated at over £8 billion. About 3 billion from agriculture, another 3 billion from tourism, and really heavy restrictions. That was traced to illegally, what they think was either illegally imported meat or maybe meat that came from catering that was maybe a plane, etc. And then that was fed to pigs without being fully pasteurized, to kill anything in it. So there was two failures along the line there: A, the product coming in, and B, the failure to pasteurize. So the that one of the pieces for both Germany and for Hungary and Slovakia is potentially there is a similar source there, either a person carrying it on their clothing or personally imported meat or dairy that was the source of the infection. So while it sounds really, really restricted, say you can't bring in your cheese, you can't bring in your meat, um, the risk is actually very real. It's not necessarily the UK government overreacting.
Of course. Well, then, how often do FMD outbreaks occur then?
So they kind of come and go a little bit. So the previous one in Europe, before Germany in January, was in Bulgaria in 2011. And the last big outbreak in Europe, really significant outbreak, was 2001, and the main outbreak was in the UK. There's a relatively small outbreak in Ireland, and a relatively contained small outbreak in the Netherlands as well. But the UK, like I was saying, they're a minute ago, bore the brunt of the animals being culled. There's almost 6 million animals. It was an incredibly significant event, and obviously the direct and indirect economic damage that came from that. Um, and there's been since 2000, there's been a couple of other relatively small outbreaks. I mean, the last one in the UK was actually in 2007, which was a leak from a lab in Surrey. So one of the main uh, virus reference labs in the UK is actually in Surrey, and it looks like, or what was thought, an incorrect disposal of a sample, and that got into the wastewater, and there was a relatively small outbreak came on the back of that, but that was contained and very quickly.
All right. Well, thank you, John. I promise not to bring anything or to get upset with customs when they tell me I can't bring it into the country. And thank you for watching. For more financial content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.